Welcome to the Global GHK Foundation anniversary celebration. I would like to start out this presentation by thanking Dr. Varghese for his constant drive and inspiration in the work that we do at the Global GHK Foundation. Today, I am going to be doing a presentation on shortening the healing and repair phase. I'd like to start out this presentation by dedicating this to two of the people who have made a significant influence in my life, and that's Dr. Richard Geert Hummer and his chosen professor of theory, Helmut Pielhaar. Sadly, I did not get to meet with Dr. Hummer before he died in 2017. Without a doubt, he was the greatest medical mind in the history of mankind. He single-handedly unraveled the biological code and then spent the rest of his life being persecuted for his medical discoveries. Helmut Pielhaar was Dr. Hummer's chosen lecturer to spread Germanische Heilkunde. Helmut was the tip of the spear and dedicated his life to teaching Germanische Heilkunde. Very sadly, he passed away on the 31st of August 2022. May their souls rest in eternal peace. So let's start off with a Global GHK Foundation disclaimer. This information presented herein is for educational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. Participants are advised to consult their medical doctors for health-related concerns before applying any information disclosed during this presentation. Students are instructed not to use this information presented herein for examination purposes. And if anybody would like to learn more information about this presentation, then they can either go to my training website, tht.fyi/bioswitch, or my author website, https danny-carroll.com. Now we get to the subject of this presentation, and that's basically shortening the healing and repair phase after you have resolved a conflict. Now, according to Dr. Hummer's research findings, we can establish how long a healing and repair phase will run for, and the intensity of the pain and inflammation in the healing and repair phase. And the rule that Dr. Hummer basically laid out for us is that the length and duration of the healing and repair phase will run for the equivalent of the conflict active phase. So if you have been conflict active for 1 month, then you will experience 1 month of pain and inflammation. If you have been conflict active for 14 months, then you will experience 14 months of pain and inflammation. Now, the amount of pain and inflammation you experience during that period is determined by the intensity of the conflict. So the more intense the conflict, the more intense the pain and inflammation will be in the healing phase. Now, if you've experienced a long-running conflict, you've been in conflict for 14 months, 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, sometimes it can be decades, right? The question then comes, after I resolve that conflict, am I going to be in pain and experience inflammation for that same amount of time? And under the standard rules of Dr. Hummer's medical discoveries in the biological solution, then that is exactly how long you are going to be in pain and discomfort for. So the question arises, is there any way to shorten the healing phase? And the answer to that is yes, there is. Now, when we come to shortening the healing phase, there are two distinct situations that we need to differentiate here. And that is what we call a primary healing phase, and that is when you are going through, you have just resolved a conflict, and you are in the healing and the repair phase, the primary healing and repair phase for that conflict. Okay, so that's one situation that you will experience pain and inflammation in. The second situation, a program that's running on subconscious tracks and reminders. Okay, so this is basically a situation where your subconscious mind has stored down memories or tracks and reminders of the conflict that you went through. And what happens is when you get back on to those tracks or reminders, biologically, the whole biological program will basically get triggered again. So if you had bronchitis during the conflict, and you resolve that conflict and you go into healing, if your subconscious mind has stored down reminders of that experience, which it will almost always do, then if you get back on to any of those tracks or reminders that your subconscious mind has stored, then the bronchitis program will go back into the conflict active process and reset and restart the biological program to start running again. So in this training video, I'm going to deal with both of those situations. I'm going to deal with a primary healing phase, and I'm going to deal with a biological program that was running as a result of subconscious tracks and reminders. The subject I've chosen for this to use in order to showcase this to you basically is hip pain. Okay, now I have two case studies for you. One primary healing phase, and that case study is a excruciating hip pain as a result of resolving a conflict. And in hip pain, the conflict is either the inability to endure a situation, or it's the inability to persevere through a certain situation. So I have one case study on primary healing that is from my study buddy, Mr. Shyam Mehta, and he's going to explain to you the conflict that he went through and how he resolved that conflict, and ultimately also how he shortened the healing phase by manipulating his subconscious mind with his conscious mind. And then we have a second case study that I'm going to take you through, which is again on hip pain. And this is my lovely wife, Anu Tucky, and she had a reoccurring hip pain problem as a result of tracks and reminders. So we'll go through those case studies, and then I will pull out the learning points after we finish reviewing the case study.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. So two things I should tell you all before I start with my story of the hip pain, and that is that number one is that I'm a lawyer, and this had to do with something regarding my work. And number two is I ride horses, and that is what misled me into thinking it was something other than my lawyering. So this is what happened. Over the years, because I resolved this in 2021, because that was the time when the pain was acute, was really acute. I think it was 2020 or 21. But before that, it used to, I used to get the pain in the hip. It was in my, sometimes in my left or right, but I think primarily in my left hip. And it used to come and go a little bit. And I thought maybe, I did something wrong while riding the horse, and it's nothing to do with anything, nothing else. Then, so I didn't pay much attention to it because it used to just come and go. Then one day, I was out of Bombay, that's where I live, and I was in Delhi. And I had some meeting there, and I was returning to Bombay the same day. And during the morning, the pain started. And by the afternoon, by the time I had to go back to the airport and catch my flight, it was so excruciating that I could barely walk. And I was so embarrassed because I thought that I would have to ask for a wheelchair at the airport. And that is something which just, it just didn't fit in. So I was hobbling, and then I saw one of those golf carts that roam around in the airport, and I took a ride with that instead to reach the gate. I just couldn't walk. And then I wondered what will happen when I reached Bombay, because I had to go somewhere. I had to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours from the airport to go and meet my friends at a place outside Bombay. So I was, wondering how all this is going to happen. But anyway, so I did it. I landed and I drove in excruciating pain, and I went to that place, and there was someone who advised me to put my leg up and do this, and the blood should circulate in a reverse way, and all kinds of theories. And I just sat there in pain with my leg up. Of course, I did whatever I was told because I wanted to relieve myself of the pain. And this was in the early days of my experiences with Germanic healing. Of course, since then, I have experienced a lot more, thanks to Danny. And I've solved it thanks to Danny. And I'll leave that for another day. So I decided at night, I said, let me see if I can switch this off. I couldn't believe that I would be able to, because it was so painful that I thought this can't just be switched off. It's not possible. So I started thinking, what could it be? And I had to go back to all those times when I had those niggling pains and try to figure out what did I heal when the pain started, because this is a healing symptom. You heal, you resolve your conflict, and the pain begins. So I had to go back to all the times I had the pain, and I had to identify what was the conflict which went into healing at each stage. And it was not easy, but I said, let me do it. And of course, I had the recent one, which was very painful. So I had that, and that I could remember that at least, what was going on in my life at that time. And then at night, I was just lying in my bed and thinking, and it struck me that this is what I did not want to endure, which is most likely I didn't want to endure. And this is a part of my work. As you all know, as a lawyer, you have trials, and during trials, you cross-examine witnesses. So cross-examination is a very tedious thing. It's very difficult, and it's tough. And frankly, I didn't want to endure that. And just before the pain began, I had this huge trial going on, and I had to cross-examine witnesses, experts from all over the world on gas turbines, which I have no clue about, but I had to learn everything. So I was very stressed about that. How am I going to do this? And I didn't want to endure it. Will I do it right? It's a self-esteem conflict. So will I get it right? Will I mess up? So all that stress was going on in my head, And the moment the cross-examination ended, the pain started. In fact, during the cross, it started because it started going well. So I started healing immediately that, this is going well, I can do this, And when it finished, the pain increased. And unfortunately for me, I flew to Delhi immediately the next day, and I was finished. So this connection I made in my head at night before sleeping, and I told myself, look, this is the conflict. And this is why I've got the pain. And I'm good at this work. So why am I worried about it? It will be fine. And I went to sleep. Next morning, I woke up, and it was like a minor miracle. I was 70% better. I could walk. I had a little pain, of course, because still 30% remained. And I said, wow, so I seem to have hit the nail on the head. It is nothing to do with all the times about horse riding and this and that, nothing of the sort. It had to do with this. I went, I kept at it, kept telling myself, this is the cause, and it's fine now. I'm fine with this. I can do it. I've always done it. I've done it 100 times. Why am I always stressing about it? Next morning, I was 99 or 98% better. I told Danny I can run the marathon. There's no problem now. I'm fine. No physiotherapy. Normally, you would run to a doctor. The doctor will ask you to take X-rays, MRIs, send you for physiotherapy for a couple of months. I've done all that in the past when I didn't know about Germanic healing, and it takes weeks or months before you feel better. In this case, it was 48 hours. So that's the main part of the story. Now, the other thing is, which I should also tell you, is that it doesn't end there. It can recur because you can go into the same conflict from time to time, and it happens to me even now. So the good part is I know the trigger. So I immediately tell myself, don't go down that road. This is all going to go well, because it's not only about that. It could be anything then, anything else which you stress about, you feel, oh, I don't want to endure this, the pain will start. So now that I'm so clued into it, and all of us can do it, because we all know, we all over time, if you look at your habits and you look at your pains and aches, you will know what causes it. So now the moment it starts, I can switch it off, because I know this is the thought or the thought process which is triggering it. Cut it out. So I cut it out. I tell myself, oh, you're fine, don't worry about this, it'll go well, and it stops. So that's the thing about this Germanic healing. You find the cause and you connect it to the symptom. So the cause and the effect, you connect the two, and you can go into healing. And once you do that, you know the kind of triggers or the kind of things or thoughts that trigger your condition. You can stop those also, or you can make the connection whenever you feel the pain, and again, you will heal and it will stop. But the good thing is, in your second and third time when you get the pain, you can catch it early. You can catch it very early, and you don't have to go through the excruciating pain that you may have gone through the first or second time. So this was my magical experience, as Danny would like to call it, cathartic healing with the hip pain, which was so excruciating at that point of time.
Thanks, Danny. Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. If you watch the BioSwitch programs, I show up in there too with an experience turning off gluten intolerance. So the hip pain wasn't my first time. For context, I am a 44-year-old woman in relatively good health, though for years I suffered from insomnia due to my gluten intolerance. And once I turned that off, I was able to, once I understood how the program worked, I was able to sleep a lot better. But in the last couple of years, when Danny and I don't live together, he lives in India and I live in Ireland. Whenever Danny would visit and we would share a bed, I started getting very severe hip pain in both my hips. And it would only happen at nighttime. It wouldn't happen during the day. And it was clear that the sleeping situation was a track for me, and I just couldn't figure out what it was. Initially, I thought, okay, well, because I'm sleeping with my partner and there's less space in the bed, that perhaps my sleeping posture is such that I'm putting extra pressure on my hip. And that's what this is. So I tried a few different changes to my sleeping posture, and that didn't help. And then Danny and I had a discussion about, my history of insomnia and what it meant to have, to switch off using the BioSwitch. But there was a track for me that whenever we were sleeping together, I felt like, oh no, he's going to start snoring. It's going to disturb my sleep. So when we had a conversation about this, I realized that going and sharing a bed with him was turning on a track of not being able to endure the shared sleeping situation. And it was causing me this very debilitating hip pain. I would have to, I'd flip over in the bed every 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so, and was not sleeping well for about 2 years whenever we were together. So as soon as I realized that the conflict here was having to endure sharing a bed with my partner and be living in fear of him snoring again and disrupting my sleep, I thought, okay, that's the problem. Let me try a mantra with my subconscious mind. And the mantra I said to myself, subconscious mind, I understand the hip pain is coming because I cannot endure the fear of having sleep disrupted again. So there's no risk of my sleep being disrupted. Turn off the hip pain. And I did that for a few nights and then it was over. Hip pain over, 2 years of pain gone like magic. And that was in itself a miracle. But Danny mentioned there were 2 tracks. But so a couple of trips later, the hip pain came back and I thought, oh God, did I identify the wrong track? But we realized there were actually 2 triggers for me. And one was not only his snoring, but it was also that I have a queen size bed, but in India we have a king size bed. So when we're sleeping in a queen size bed, we're, a bit tighter in the bed. And so another track for me was not being able to endure not having the space of the bed to myself, because when he's not here, I starfish out and the whole bed is mine. So I did a second mantra, which was subconscious mind. It is a blessing to be able to share a bed with my husband. There is no need for me to have this hip pain, turn the hip pain off related to sharing this space. And that night, it just happened. I said the pain came, I said the mantra, and the pain went away. So this was maybe a 30 to 45 minute process. So that's the story. And I've been hip pain free now for, I think, about 6 months, right, babe?
Yeah. Thank you, Shan. Thank you, Anud, for sharing those case studies with us. Let's examine those case studies from the traditional biological solution that Dr. Hummer developed, which basically is nature's design. And then we will also review those case studies in terms of how successfully Sham shortened what could have been a very, very painful and also potentially quite long healing phase, and how he successfully managed to reduce that to a 48-hour period. And we will review the case study of my wife, how she switched off the subconscious tracks and reminders that continuously re-triggered the hip pain when we were sleeping together in the same bed. So let's first look at the case studies through the filter of the biological solution. The biological solution was developed by Dr. Hummer and essentially has 2 main components. Firstly, Dr. Hummer recommends wherever reasonably possible that you come to a real-life resolution to a conflict. And secondly, basically, that you avoid the tracks and reminders, the subconscious tracks and reminders that your subconscious mind has stored down. Now, to prove that this is actually nature's design, Dr. Hummer presented a very interesting case study of his boxer dogs. Okay, Dr. Hummer always kept boxer dogs, and one day his dogs used to always wait in the car for him to come. And one day he had 2 boxer dogs, a male and a female. They were sitting in the car. The window was half open, and a shepherd dog walked past Dr. Hummer's car. So the male boxer dog jumped out of the half-opened window and chased after the shepherd dog that walked past the car. Now, the female boxer dog tried to follow the male dog out of the car, basically got trapped in the window and fell from the window, and she broke her pelvis. Okay, she was then unable to walk for a few months whilst her pelvis healed. And what Dr. Hummer wanted to do was to test how nature will make you avoid tracks and reminders. So what he basically did is he got some sausages and he cooked them, and he put the sausage on the car seat. And then he left the car door open and let the female dog out and took the dog to the car. And basically the female boxer dog, because she'd fallen from the car and broken her pelvis, so the car would have been a track and reminder to that experience. Basically, the boxer dog refused to get into the car in order to be able to get the sausage from the car seat. And in fact, the female boxer dog refused to ever get in the car ever again. So, by nature's biological design, basically, we are supposed to avoid the tracks and reminders that our subconscious mind has stored, and animals in nature will do this instinctively, which is why the dog would not get back in the car again. So if we apply the rules of the biological solution to these two case studies, let's take Sham's case study first. Sham had been in a conflict of not being able to endure cross-examining technical experts from abroad on a subject of gas turbines or something from memory that he had no expertise in. So it was very difficult for him in these situations to learn about gas turbines and question experts, etc., in the case that he was litigating. Okay, so Sham's conflict was being unable to endure the cross-examinations. Now, that conflict had been running for I think a couple of years or maybe even longer. So when Sham ultimately resolved that conflict, he then went into a primary healing phase that potentially would have lasted for months if he had not deployed the techniques that I've taught him in terms of how to use your conscious mind to manipulate the biological programs in the subconscious mind. Okay, so in Sham's case, what I taught him to do is that when you consciously connect the cause of a problem with the symptoms of the problem. So in Sham's case, he had excruciating hip pain because of his inability to endure the cross-examinations, and he had finished litigating that case and essentially resolved that conflict. If he hadn't have gone through any intervention, he would have been in excruciating pain for some considerable period of time. So what Sham did was basically consciously connect the cause of the hip pain, the inability to endure cross-examination, with the symptoms of the problem, i.e. the hip pain. And when you consciously connect the cause of a problem with the symptoms of the problem, it triggers a cathartic healing process that so instead of being in a situation where he potentially had to endure excruciating hip pain for weeks or maybe months even, Sham was able to trigger the cathartic healing in that hip pain, and basically within 24 hours or within 12 hours, the hip was 70% better, and then within 48 hours, he was pain-free. So what Sham basically did in that situation was to significantly shorten the healing and repair phase by consciously connecting the cause of the problem with the symptom of the problem, which triggers a cathartic healing process. So it speeds up significantly the time that it takes you in order to complete the healing of the bone and the joints and the ligaments and whatever areas were affected during that conflict of being unable to endure that cross-examination. So Sham has essentially avoided maybe weeks or months of excruciating pain, that's physio and all of the other things that come with if you just let the healing process run its full course. Now, if you look at the difference between between Sham's case and Anood's case, Anood basically had a problem that when we sleep together, that she was experiencing hip pain while she slept, only at nighttime, and it kept her awake because she had to turn every 15 or 20 minutes because of the pain in her hip. Now, originally, she thought that was caused by being in a tighter sleeping space, but ultimately she found out that that was not the case. She was running on a subconscious track or reminder. In fact, she had two subconscious tracks and reminders, one for the inability to be able to sleep. When we first met, I used to snore quite badly. That's another thing I managed to switch off. So one of the tracks and reminders that Anoop's subconscious mind had stored down was basically me snoring. And because this is a subconscious track or reminder, if Anoop had not switched off that track, then basically that would have run for a lifetime, or every time we basically slept in the same bed. Okay. Now, if we put Anoop's case through the biological solution problem solving structure, so we have to resolve the conflict in real life and then avoid the tracks, as Dr. Hummer's boxer dog did when he refused to get in the car. But the practical implications in a situation that Anoop was in, the real life resolution to the conflict had been resolved. I stopped snoring years ago, so the real life resolution to the conflict is in place and has been resolved. Okay, but the subconscious track or reminder was still in place. So if Anoop was to avoid the tracks, which is basically the nature's design and the rules according to the biological solution, the only practical way that she would have been able to achieve that basically would be for us to not sleep in the same bed. Now, that's not really a resolution to a conflict that either I or she would have wanted. So, what do you do in a situation where you cannot avoid the track? Okay, I had the same problem with this. I got during 2021 and 2022. I had rheumatoid arthritis in my left arm, which was triggered by my wife being forced to take the mandated medical interventions. Okay. I was working in the American Frontline Doctors, and they were analyzing the contents of these vials, and it was a horror show. So with this rheumatoid arthritis, basically, my wife was a central track to the conflict, and many of the disagreements and arguments we had over those jabs that she was being mandated to take, basically were in our residences at the time in Bombay and in Brussels. So if I follow the standard biological solution, and I try to avoid those tracks, practically that would have meant that I would have had to divorce my wife and move home. So that was not an acceptable solution for me. So what do you do in a situation where you cannot avoid the tracks? That was my situation with rheumatoid arthritis, and that would have been a new situation if she wanted to avoid the subconscious track of being unable to endure my snoring, which was resolved years ago. So in these situations where you cannot avoid the tracks, or frankly, I mean, I would use these in any situation, what you can basically do is, again, you can switch off these tracks. Now, the mechanism for doing that is exactly the same as the mechanism that Sham followed in his case study, where he consciously connected the cause of the problem with the symptoms of the problem. What you're doing where you have a subconscious track or reminder stored in your memory is you are connecting the subconscious track to the conflict, and you are telling your subconscious mind that conflict has been resolved. And basically what you're doing is you're instructing your subconscious mind to switch that track off. Okay, so when my wife said, "Okay, I know I have a subconscious track or reminder that has been stored of my inability to endure my husband snoring," that problem is resolved. So please switch off the track or reminder that I'm unable to endure my husband snoring, because that problem is long resolved. So when you go through that process of connecting the track to the original conflict and then giving specific instructions to your subconscious mind to switch that track off, basically it will switch the track off like a light switch. Now, as you saw in the case study, my wife had two tracks running that triggered that hip pain program. And the second track was basically her inability to endure that we had less sleeping space together when we sleep in the same bed. So what Anu did in order to solve that problem, again, if I wanted to avoid that, or if she wanted to avoid that track, it would have meant that we could not have slept in the same bed, which is not an acceptable or a practical solution. Okay, so in this particular situation, what Anu did was she consciously connected the track. So she said, "Okay, I know you've stored a track of me being unable to endure sleeping in the same space as my husband. I'm blessed to be able to sleep in the same space as my husband. Please switch off that subconscious track and reminder." Now, if you look at the difference between switching off a primary healing phase and switching off a subconscious track or reminder. So in Sham's case, that basically triggered, it took 48 hours to go from a point in a primary healing process where he consciously connected the cause of the problem with the symptoms of the problem. It basically took 48 hours to get to a point where he was pain free. Okay. Now, when a chronic program is running on subconscious tracks and reminders, when you switch that track off, basically it switches off the pain immediately. So Anu explained the situation where she was laying in bed. She'd switched one track off of the snoring to the hip pain, and then the second track came up, and she was laying in bed in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning, and basically she switched that hip pain off literally like a light switch. So when you use your conscious mind to manipulate those programs in the subconscious mind, basically that pain switches off immediately. Okay. Now, again, because this is on a subconscious track and reminder, she had two options. One option, historically, to avoid that track, basically, it would have meant that we wouldn't have been able to sleep in the same bed. Okay. Now, because she has learned the skill of manipulating her subconscious mind to switch that track off, basically she then switched that off again like a light switch. If she had not have switched that off and not avoided the track, then basically she would have been faced with the possibility of either experiencing that hip pain at nighttime when we slept, and that would have been for the rest of her life. Okay, so these are problems that when you learn to manipulate or use your conscious mind to manipulate your subconscious mind, you are literally learning to end biological programs that could run for a lifetime. So again, in terms of coming back to the original purpose of this talk, to shorten the healing phase, Sham shortened his healing phase from a couple of days, from potentially months down to a couple of days in a primary healing program, and Anud basically switched off the track to a chronic pain problem, that if she had not had gone through that process, that she potentially could have suffered for the rest of her life. So these are new developing ways that we can learn how to significantly shorten the healing phase, and we do not, if you've gone through a long period of conflict, you do not have to sit there and go through a long healing phase. There are ways that you can go through and basically to switch those tracks off, or to switch those primary healing programs off, so you can significantly shorten the process. This is the training that I give in my BioSwitch training. If you would like to learn to develop this skill, you can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to guide you.